Well, Greg Helbeck, I'm so excited that we got this interview on the books. Been a big fan, and it's honestly someone that we were just talking about how social media is, and I talk about that on a lot of episodes. But you kind of get an idea of how someone moves and how somebody is personality wise and philosophy wise just by kind of seeing them on social media and how they post and how they interact. Obviously, for those of you guys who don't know Greg, he was a guest expert speaker in the 80/20 Academy, the closed mastermind group that we had back in April, right after we got back from Miami Beach. Dropped a lot of great value on there. Just great conversation, great philosophy behind how he's successful, what he does, and why he does it. Hosts a podcast that almost has 200 episodes, a lot of downloads, thousands and thousands of downloads. Really just a young mover and shaker in the space. I've been a big fan of his. And it's really someone on a personal note that we're just talking for the first time, just me and him today, but just catching up for a few minutes definitely seems like somebody that you know for years. So big fan of yours, Greg, big fan of Pay the Way podcast, everything that you got going on, the book reviews. I'm a massive book reader. I don't put out the content like you do. I am thinking about doing some solo episodes on book breakdowns, but thank you so much for coming on. And I know it's even been a crazy wild summer for you going back from San Diego to New York, which maybe we'll touch on a little bit, man.
Been wild, man. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this. I know we had to reschedule a few times, and really a big fan of what you guys got going on too at InvestorFuse and at the 82 and with the 80/20 REI. That was a really fun interview. And I secretly tell everyone I love being a guest on podcasts. When I host podcasts, it's just a little bit more work. So I'd rather just sit back and be the guy doing the answering of the questions versus the asking of questions. So I really appreciate you taking the time to have me on today.
A pleasure and a privilege. I think that's going to parallel nicely into how you run your operation, your business. So to start off, man, what does your business and everything that you're doing today look like? Just to give context before we start getting into the meat and potatoes here.
For sure. So I run a business called Velocity House Buyers. I started it back in 2016 or 17. I think it was 16. And basically what we do every day is we do a lot of marketing. We speak to sellers, we make offers, and we buy houses. And then we have several exit strategies that we use. So on a great month, we're buying 4 or 5 houses. Don't do high volume, but our deals are very big because the areas that we operate in are the New York tri-state area, which is extremely expensive, and then San Diego, which is even more expensive. So they're 2 of the tougher markets in the country. New York, mostly because of the logistics and the attorneys and stuff like that. And then San Diego, just the competitiveness and the sophistication of the sellers. So they're 2 hard markets, but, every month we're cranking deals out. Our average profit is, if we're wholesaling 30 grand and if we're closing much more than that. So been able to buy a good amount of real estate at this point in my career. I've done over 100 deals and been able to slowly start to buy rental properties now as I've matured in the business a little bit. I started when I was 20. So I was a young kid, and I'm obviously got a lot more to learn. I'm 26 now. So that's what we do on a monthly basis. We do probably about 50% of the deals are wholesale deals where we're just going to straight up double close or assign and make a fee there. Or if it's a deal we're going to actually take down, I look at the numbers. If I can keep it as a rental, I'll keep it as a rental. And if it just doesn't make sense as a rental for some reason, a lot of the times it's because the taxes are high, I'll fix and flip the house, or I'll just clean it out and put it on the market. But my real thing is net profit. And also, when you make money on a real estate deal, what are you doing with that money? I think a lot of people make money on their deal and they somehow just flow all that back into their business, and it just turns into like a big expense machine. I'm very intentional on what I do with the money that I make from my real estate deals, and I save a lot of that money so I can invest it in other things. And I like saving money too, just because it gives me a lot of peace of mind. When you can save a lot of money up, you can, if you wanted to, you could screw off for a while and you could be good, So I'm big on like personal finance, money management, and things like that. So that's a snapshot of our business in a nutshell.
Love it. That reminds me of a Ed Mylett video I was actually watching last night, where he said he just loves saving money and stacking money, and
love it.
Kind of the same principle. I know you're an Ed Mylett fan as well, just from listening to your podcast and you being interviewed on other podcasts. So where do we want to take this, man? I'm not sure if I said this in the intro, but this could really be like a mini series with Greg if we wanted to do like 45 1-hour episodes of different topics. But from me following Greg and just meeting him today, really, I think a few things that we can hit on is he is a super high level guy. Obviously, like if you listen to his podcast, a very concise speaker, a very thoughtful and well drawn out speaker that can relay concepts and theories to you guys. So being a high level real estate operator that still spends or is spending a lot of times in the acquisition seat of his business, and he's in two difficult markets, I think we can focus part of the interview just kind of on like your philosophy behind sales negotiation. He's had Chris Voss on his show, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
as well. So this interview, guys, I know I'm going to be all over the place. I have a lot of stuff I want to ask Greg, but I think we can talk about acquisitions because that's where you make your money, right? Sales, marketing, and sales. That's where you're making your money. You can have the best tools and systems and processes in place for your VA, but if you don't have the sales and marketing skills, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where I see a lot of newer investors or people who spin their wheels. They have a lot of trouble, and I'm not perfect at all. There's a lot of mistakes that get made on a weekly basis in our company too. But at the end of the day, I've discovered that at least in our business, like the direct to seller business, because everyone has different exit strategies, the biggest thing that you can do that will get you in trouble is spend time with the wrong sellers. And you have to be, there's a fine line though you got to walk, because there is two schools of thought. I'm only going to look for the laydowns, and it's going to be hard to find those in my markets, at least. It really anywhere now. And the way we're recording this, it's the hottest real estate market in 2021 that's ever happened. So sellers know what they got. It doesn't matter where you are. So you got to know who's as Todd Toback would say, who's a pretender and who's a contender. And then when you have the contenders, the real sellers, you got to really understand that all your time should be focused with them. And then you need to have a strategic follow-up process for the ones who are not going to sell right now, but they're still going to sell. But like I said earlier, spending time with the wrong sellers that you can't serve and you can't help is going to burn you out, and it's going to make you think that all your marketing doesn't work and all this is BS. So I've found that having a real process to see if someone's a real solid seller has been extremely helpful for me. And I can get into my process that I do internally. And I think it's really helpful. And I think it's a very actionable thing that people can take from this interview and they can implement like immediately. Because at the end of the day, like I want them to be able to implement what I share. So I can get into that real quick. It's not too long.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So basically I found, and I'll tell you how this happened. So about a year ago now, a little less than a year ago, we were getting a just tremendous amount of leads coming in from primarily direct mail. And I didn't have an assistant at the time. I had a couple of VAs working with me, and I was still spending a lot of time with sellers, and I'm like, man, there's something wrong here. Like there's got to be like some better way to like filter these people out, because I feel like I'm just spending all my time with these jerks. So I actually went into my CRM and I looked at all of the deal, like the most recent deals that closed. I took 20 of them, and I'm like, let me look at all these deals and see what like the common denominator was on all these properties. So I found 6 things that were indications that a deal was going to go down. And the 6 things were that the property was either vacant or there was at least one unit that was vacant if it was a multi-unit property. So there was some vacancy component going on. The second thing I found was that the property was either in terrible shape or it could have used a rehab. Like it was dated, it was original, like it was a grandma's house or something like that. The third thing I found that was the seller had a real why on why they wanted. Like they weren't like, oh, well, I got your postcard, I want to see what your offer is, or you called me, whatever that crap is. They had a real reason for why they were selling. They inherited the property. They were moving somewhere. They couldn't afford it. Like there was a real compelling story on why they wanted to sell that property. The fourth thing was that they knew they could list the house and get more money, but they didn't want to for some reason, which is, by the way, my personal favorite. That's when you know you have a deal, in my opinion, or at least a good opportunity for an investor to buy a house. Sometimes you lose to other investors, but that's a whole other story. The fifth thing was that their asking price was less than the Zillow value. And that is really applicable in like my markets because they're expensive and competitive. So like if they're already asking less than what the Zillow value is, like it's a pretty good indication there's probably going to be a deal there. And the last one is that their timeline was clear. Like they wanted to sell either right away or within the next 6 months. Like they weren't like, well, I'll sell when I'm ready, or I'll sell when my grandma, ends up moving to Florida. Like they were like, I want to sell in the next 3 months. I want to sell in the next month. And they were crystal clear on that. So I looked at those and I said, all right, most of my deals like checked like 5 or 6 of those boxes, 4 to 5 of those boxes out of those 6 things I shared. So I said, for now on, in order for a prospect to be deemed a lead in my company, they have to check at least 2 boxes or else they're not going to count as a lead. Because I found that if they didn't at least check 2 boxes, there was a very low chance they were ever going to sell to an investor at a discount. Therefore, by disqualifying them, which sales is ultimately a disqualifying process, it's going to free up more time for me and my assistant to spend time with people we can actually help. And I'm not going to feel bad about the ones who I said, hey, I don't think this is a fit based on what you shared with me. I don't think a cash offer makes a lot of sense. And it got me to the truth a lot faster. So that's the first thing that I did. And I started to notice that my lead to deal ratio shot up because I was disqualifying about 40% of the people that called in. And the people that remained in the ring, I was able to convert them at a higher level and spend ultimately less time, but made more money, which is weird because like you think like, oh, I got to work harder to make more money, which is definitely true in a sense. But if you're working and talking with people who are unqualified, you're just going to get frustrated, especially if you're doing a lot of marketing that is like text messaging and cold calling and all that stuff and mail, even mail. So I started doing that, and I started to realize that, you know, a seller almost had to audition for my show. And I'm not like trying to be like the power guy at all, but like if a seller wasn't a fit, I would politely tell them, based on what you shared with me, I don't know if a cash offer would really make sense for you, and this is why. What do you think we should do going forward? And then they're either going to tell me, well, I didn't tell you about the fact that I'm in foreclosure. And then all of a sudden they opened up the floodgates and we can talk about a problem they might not have wanted to share with me. Or even better, they're like, Greg, I really appreciate you being really honest with me. I just wanted to call to see what this is about. And I don't think this even makes any sense. And I appreciate you being an upfront guy. And I've literally had sellers leave me a damn Google review. And they said like, Greg was super cool. He was so honest. He didn't buy my house, and he told me why it wasn't a good fit. And I would recommend just talking to him because he's an honest, upfront guy. And that helps my credibility and helps my website. And I get a lot of leads that way because no matter what, I'm really upfront with the seller. And I always tell them this one line, and this is something people can take from this interview. I say, no matter whether I buy your house or not, my goal is to be helpful, right? So if you need help, I'm not going to obligate you to selling me the house, but I'll help either way. And it builds so much goodwill and rapport with people. They just want to, help you somehow. And that's been a game changer for our business. And we've done a lot more deals since then, and we've made a lot more money, and we've been able to segment people we can help and really identify our customer avatar, which has just allowed us to grow our business. And this year we've had the best year ever so far.
Amazing, man. Beautifully said. And I think you're 100% spot on as far as what Greg just laid out is very applicable to everybody. Just reviewing X amount of closed deals, finding the commonalities around those. Probably a lot of those you can take right from Greg. Maybe the property doesn't necessarily have to be vacant, and maybe depending on your market, the seller doesn't have an asking price under the Zestimate. But pretty much every other variable that Greg mentioned, I think, is applicable for you guys to do on your own. The point really quick that you said about kind of like brute force working or thinking that you have to grind reminds me a little bit of a quote that you and Strat were talking about, I think on one of the last 2 interviews that you guys did in the last year, where he was saying something like you have to kill the hustle in yourself. And that's something I'm reading from a book, and it's coming up in thought for me now because a book that actually Strat recommends me when I interviewed him was Psycho Cybernetics. And it talks a lot about like mental effortlessness, like working without mental, like over mental effort. Not saying like not working long hours or not working diligently or hard or focused on your work, but like a lot of those ideas, like reflecting on past transactions that were successful and kind of just time where you can take off work, typically not during during your 9 to 5, like that's almost impossible to just shut stuff off for that whole time. But when you can have like big thinking time off of work, which would include this breaking down deals, is sometimes where you have your own breakthroughs. You're going to hear from top people like Greg, like his philosophy behind it and how it worked for him, and apply it yourself. But I love how you broke that down and makes a ton of sense of why that's led you to your best year thus far.
Yeah. I mean, it just allows like me to realize like, don't take what I said and be like, oh, if they don't check 6 boxes, it's not a lead. They have to check 2 out of 6. Doesn't matter what 2, you know what I mean? So, some markets are going to be different than others. Like in the Midwest, it might be different, it's cheaper. Right. But like I've found that if a prospect doesn't at least have 2 of those 6 boxes checked, there's a very, 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 very low chance they're going to sell to an investor at a discount. So if I can have a kind of like a standard baseline on what type of problem I solve, I can see if that prospect measures out against that baseline. And then if they meet the baseline, it's almost like if you're trying to sell, a product to someone and they don't have the money or they don't have the need. It's like, hey, I'd love to have you be a customer, but based on what you said, you don't really need this and you can't afford it. So like, I don't know if it would make sense for you to even buy this right now because I don't know if it solves a problem for you. And then they're either going to say, oh, you know what, I can get the money, or no, you know what, I didn't tell you that whatever. So like you make them almost try out for your show. And what that does is it changes the dynamic of the conversation, because you want them to ultimately sell you. And that is a little harder to do, I will say, in this market where it is hyper competitive. You have to walk that fine line, and you got to get commitments out of people, which we can get into. But at the same time, I think another big thing for me that has helped convert bigger deals is like, I don't say this to sellers to be arrogant, and it doesn't come off that way usually, but I tell them, listen, I don't need to buy your house. I buy enough houses. I've done this for a long time. I'd love to buy your house. I don't need to buy your house, and I'm not going to roll over like a dog on my back to have you sell me your house. And I just want to be clear with you about that, because I want to make sure ultimately, if we were to work together, it solves a problem that you have. And it also allows me to buy a house that I can make a profit on. And that's scary to say. That is scary to say if you're new, and maybe you do need to buy the house. And listen, I still need more deals. Of course, I need my business to operate and optimize, but that also gets the seller to see that you're not desperate and you don't need their house. And I always pad that statement with, my goal is to help you and I'm here to help you, but I just want to let you know, I don't need to buy your house. I have a lot of houses, and I'm ultimately here to help you with something you're looking to achieve. And it's scary to do that. But when you do that, I'm telling you right now, these sellers are going to be a lot more open to talking to you, because they know that even though they got 5 postcards in the mail, this guy, Greg, is not going to freaking jerk my bobber. He's going to like be upfront with me. He's not going to BS me. I have a good friend, and he always says, no matter whether I buy your house or not, my kids are still going to eat tonight. And I found that to be the funniest thing I've ever heard. And he buys houses that way because he, like, the sellers know that he's not, and he's a New York guy. So us New Yorkers are very direct by nature. But yeah, that's been really helpful too. Just like telling the seller, like, you're not desperate and you'd love to help them, but like, if it's not a fit, like, I'll tell you right away, it's not a fit.
To quote a wise man, you can't sell steak to a vegan.
You can't.
Mr. Helbeck's
Impossible.
quote saying on shows.
Impossible.
I love that, man. And that's psychology, almost like a psychology 101 thing, that it's interesting how the brain works, where the more desperate, or like if you don't seem desperate at all, like, people tend to loan the most to people that need them the least. Like, yes. It's just interesting how psychology, not just, obviously we're on a real estate show, we're talking real estate investing and specifically talking about Greg's sales process and philosophy right now, but that's so true almost with anything in life. Like the more apropos you seem of something, the more willing people are like, oh, like maybe I should be giving this person business, or like, oh, maybe I should do X, Y, Z with this person. So doing a great job of breaking down lead qualification and kind of high level sales negotiation and mindset.
100%, man. And it's just like, it just frees you up to like not have to worry. Like, even let's say you're started and you need some money to like survive, right? Like, I've been there, done that. It happens to everyone. Like, even back then, because I didn't have a lot of skills and I didn't have experience, so it was obviously harder. But like, I think if I had that mindset going in, I would have bought more properties in the beginning of my career. But I was so hungry for the deal, which was logical. I think I made a lot of mistakes by getting too aggressive. And now that I've been able to kind of reflect on the good and the bad, I'm able to just make better decisions and kind of see like the anatomy. Like, when you do a lot of deals, you kind of recognize patterns and you can sense a seller out a lot better. You know what I mean? And you like I'll give you another example. Like, there's a guy, I made a huge wholesale fee on this house. It was a 3-family house in Poughkeepsie, which is like in the Hudson Valley area of New York. And he wasn't motivated. He was not desperate. He was a very smart man. He was not broke, to what I thought. I don't think he was broke. But the 2 things that he had a vacancy component to his building. The 3 things. He had a vacancy component to his building. It needed some updates, and he had a great asking price. But he didn't have a compelling why. He didn't have bloody urgency, but he had a great price. He had a property that had a vacant unit, and it needed some work. And bam, 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 we got those 3 checked off and made a huge wholesale fee from it. So it doesn't always have to be like I think the avatar of a motivated seller, especially in San Diego and New York, if you're in a competitive market, I think what a lot of gurus make it sound like and what they actually sound like, there's a big like delta between that. And you got to just know by experience, and also by studying, if you don't have the experience, that a motivated seller might not sound like you think they sound. Like, they're not going to call and say, oh my God, I'm going to get foreclosed tomorrow. I need to sell like in an hour and I'll give it to you for free. Like, that doesn't exist. Like, I maybe had 3 or 4. I had one this year that was like that, but that's so rare. So you got to get your expectations right and know that at the end of the day, like if you don't get the deal, that's okay. There's going to be another deal that's going to come around. You're going to get that deal and you're going to be able to learn from your mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Love it. On the topic of sales, I mentioned earlier that you've interviewed Chris Voss, author of Never Split the Difference, on your podcast. That and Pitch Anything are amazing books. Again, the most interesting thing to me is kind of like how the brain works, and almost like I think something that you and I probably do naturally, just being. I'm assuming you seem like an extroverted guy, but I'm sometimes mistaken on that. Is when you're like first interacting with people, I think it's interesting whether you're like crossing people in the grocery store or even getting on like a Zoom call or whatever interaction you're having human to human. It's interesting that the brain's kind of first thing that you want to do is they're kind of like analyzing to see if you're a risk for like their life or whatever. It's almost like the more animal older brain. I'm curious, interviewing him, such a stud in sales, kind of like a recap of what that interview was like, what you learned, what you've implemented potentially from that interview, and just like what it was like interviewing such a high level author.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was not easy to get him on the show. I had to follow up for like over a year and he gets a lot of requests. So I'm grateful to have him on the show. I actually interviewed his son too in the beginning of my podcast journey. And the thing I took back, that was a fun one too. The biggest thing I took away from him, like from interacting with him on a one-on-one basis on a Zoom call, was like, he's very mellow from what it looked like. And I'm sure that's true. And he's very good at communicating his philosophy with anyone. And he's very like certain about things, not from like a rigid perspective, but you can tell he really knows what he's talking about. And he's a very relaxed guy and he's very aware of how he makes people feel. And he's very big on using the right tonality and using the right tempo. And that's something that I took away from that interview and just learning from him, from his book and from speaking with him. Like at the end of the day, what you say is important, but how you say it is even more important. So like, I could say something like this. And like, if you're like an introvert, that would give you anxiety. But if I'm like, this is going to be a great show, like just saying it like that puts a whole nother perspective on what I said. So like, there's a lot of times where I'm like in a bad mood or I'm jammed up all day and I might say the right thing to a seller, but the tone might not be there. And they could interpret me as a jerk, which is probably true because I'm an aggressive New Yorker. But if I said it differently, it would have had a better outcome. So I think the takeaway from that, what I just said, is that as important as saying the right things are, how you say them is just as important. Because if someone is very relaxed and mellow and they're talking with someone who's really aggressive and fast, they could be teaching them how to get $2 bills for $1. But their whole basis is going to be like, why the hell is this guy yelling and screaming? And what is the matter with him? Did he take his medication today? But I could almost say the wrong thing, which I don't say, like I try not to say, but if I say it the right way, they might let me recover from that. You know what I'm saying? So like, there's a big difference there. Like, and that's something that I don't see is taught, that it's not taught as much as I'd like it to be taught, where like how to say things and your tone of voice and your tempo and being able to, match people on the phone. I buy a lot of houses on the telephone and just speaking in a relaxed tone. It's like really important because at the end of the day, like you have to, the more experience you have, the easier it is to do. But in the beginning, if you can just kind of size up people and like if I'm an introvert and an extrovert. So I think the definition of that is called like an ambivert or something like that. So like sometimes I want to be quiet and by myself. Sometimes I want to hang out with other people. If I'm talking with an introvert and I know they're very introverted, I'm not going to be like, hey, what's up, man? Like, because that's going to give them anxiety. But if I'm with someone who's like more extroverted than me, I'm going to probably have to level up and be a little bit more like them just so we can have that rapport. So that's a big thing to know, especially when you're talking with sellers to make this applicable. Like if you have a seller who's like really calm, like I'll give you I love using stories to make a point because it like helps drive it home. This was a crazy deal. The guy actually ended up bringing $70,000 to the closing table. He paid $70,000 for me to buy his house. Insanity. Once in a lifetime deal, right? Like that. Well, maybe every 5 years, but he was super introverted. He was super reserved. He was super embarrassed about what was going on. And he really didn't want to share with me the root cause of why he was doing what he was doing. but I was so just on his level, and pretty much everything was on the phone. I met him one time, and like I was just like, listen, Phil. His name was Philip. I hope he's not listening, but I was like, listen, man, I'm gonna just whatever you want to do. I'm not gonna force you to sell me this house. I'm gonna just be honest with you. I'm gonna be an advisor here, and if it ends up making sense for you to sell me this house, we'll do that. If not, I'll just tell you what to do. And I was so just like trying to be on his level and mellow and calm, because I have that part of me as well. He felt so comfortable working with me. He turned down other offers that were higher than mine, that he would have ultimately had to come to the table with less money on, because he felt so comfortable with me over the phone, because I took the time to size him up and figure out what his hot buttons were. And I didn't want to press and probe deep on what his reasons were, because that would have broke our rapport, which is counterintuitive. A lot of salespeople are like, oh, probe as deep as you can. That is true. But if they don't want you to probe for some reason, I'm not going to probe, because that's going to break my rapport. So being able to do that is really, really important. And that got me a pretty good deal, right? That was competitive, right? He was shopping it around to my friends who are competitors. And he ended up going with me at less money, because he trusted me and he knew that I was there to solve his problem. And I was able to do that primarily by really matching him on his level, and making him feel like, even though it was a tough situation with his house, like I was there to solve his problem, which ultimately happened. And it was an easy deal.
Mm-hmm. So how you say things can often, as far as like the net relationship with someone, how you say things can arguably be more important than what you're saying, because at the end of the day, it's really how you make people feel. Like humans, as weird as it may sound, that I like to say this to anybody that hears me or is willing to have conversations with me, but humans really at the end of the day are just like animals of emotions and feelings. Like that's 100% how they're wired up. That's how your subconscious mind gets impressed, through like high levels of emotions and feelings. So that's super, super important. I'm curious on a personal operating system question, not even ethically, but like, because I do the same exact thing, as far as I aspire to be how you describe Chris Voss, like very high emotional intelligence, but also on a disc profile, I'm like 99.9% I. Like I love interacting with people, but I also want to be liked and admired by people and stuff like that. What's kind of like your personal operating system as you're explaining this, either on podcasts, interviews that you're on, or in any type of course material that you're on, or even internal SOPs training your team, like matching someone's tonality or kind of like feeling without it being like non-genuine, if that makes sense.
That's
like
a great question.
Almost like changing your personality.
That's a great question. I think there's a fine line to walk there. And I think it starts with having good intentions. I think you can manipulate people if you really know the stuff well. So I think it's number one, looking out for that person's best interest, and knowing that, like, with great power, like that Spider-Man quote, like with great power comes great responsibility. So, if you're looking to manipulate people and you know that you have some skills that can do that, you got to know that it's powerful and you got to use it for good. Especially when you're working with unsophisticated people, like you can really take advantage of people. Doesn't have to be in real estate. It could be anywhere, or people who are powerless or desperate. So I think you need to have good intentions, and you need to look out for their best interest. But then I also believe that if you have these tools that are powerful and you're looking out for their intentions, it is to the best for you and it's to the best for them for you to use your tools to the best of your ability, because ultimately you'll be able to see if there's a problem you can solve. So to use an example, let's say I'm talking with a seller who's very unsophisticated and they're not savvy and they probably don't have a lot of money except for their house. I'm going to tell them the truth on what my intentions are, and I'm going to tell them what their options are. And if they tell me they still want to sell a property to an investor at an investor price, I'm going to match and mirror them the whole time. But as long as I have good intentions, which I do, I'm not going to feel bad that I'm using some, negotiating tactics and psychological strategies to hopefully influence their decision to sell me their property. Right. And I'm not going to feel bad about that, because I told them up front, this is an autonomous sale. You can say no. I'm going to help you either way. My goal is to solve a problem, no matter whether it's me buying the house or not. And you have full autonomy on this decision. And when they know that and they have consent, then I'm more than happy to use some tools in my tool belt, per se, like matching their tone even more, or really labeling how they feel. Seems like you're really stressed about this property. It sounds like the last thing you want to do is have to have this thing sit on the market for 6 months and maybe not even have a buyer. Using little things like that to where it'll influence their decision and it'll get them to ultimately find out what they want to do. And I think having the right tools just helps you do that if you have the right intentions. Because at the end of the day, let's say someone's not a great communicator and they don't really study this stuff and they don't implement this stuff. They might want to solve their problem, but they might not have the tools to convey that message to the seller or the prospect to where they can really get a problem solved by working with you. Does that make sense? That was kind of like all over the place, my answer.
No, it really wasn't. Sometimes I feel like that as well. I didn't tell you before we started recording, but I try to say before every interview that I intentionally want really long, drawn out answers, because that's when I think that you kind of pick out the best thoughts from your head. And it really is an art of trying to have whatever's in your head displayed in a concise way verbally, like on an interview. So it didn't seem like you were all over the place. So it was a really good answer. I think it's reverse engineered to a core of like, this is something that everybody should have ironed out and like be reviewing quarterly or some type of rhythm to reviewing it. But like what your company's core value / like solution they're trying to solve in the marketplace. And I don't know, when you have frameworks like that set up, either for business or for your own mental frameworks, how you operate your day to day and live your life, you can kind of just do things more like automatically and flow a little bit better. So Greg definitely has like him and his team know the solution that his company provides specifically that maybe other people don't in San Diego, other investors in San Diego and New York don't. Then everything else is just kind of like icing in the cake or kind of helping that solution and service. I'm curious, just as a personal opinion, how much of the matching tonalities or just kind of like emotional intelligence stuff is innately built into people versus someone listening to this that is trying to train their lead managers and acquisitions on their team, where maybe they're doing partial sales and they have other people in their team doing sales. A lot of people listening to this do. How much of that is easily, trained or conveyed to other people? It's at least, 70, 80% efficacy of the, the owner operator of the company.
That's a great question too. I think it has to do with how they were, I guess, raised and how they were brought up and how familiar they might have been with this. So I think at the end of the day, if someone may have been raised with people, with parents or family members who were more open to this kind of stuff, I think it would maybe become more natural to them because they have heard it more. I think if they're brand new to this and they were never raised in an environment, I wasn't really raised in an environment where my parents were psychology people at all. So I had to learn a lot of it on my own through other people, but I think it is a very learnable skill. And I think that if you have been raised with a background or maybe entrepreneurial parents or something like that, it might be a little bit easier for you because they've probably done that with you, right? And they've communicated with you a certain way. But if you're starting out and you didn't have that growing up like me, I think it just comes down to the ability to commit to mastery and study it and reinforce it on almost a daily basis. Like there's times where I'll drop the ball on a sales call and I'm like, damn, that was a closable deal. And I freaking jacked that up. And I need to go back to the drawing board. I need to get my freaking education dialed in. I need to listen to another book. I got to reflect on my call. I got to maybe listen to a podcast and I got to take a nugget from that piece of material. And I got to be able to implement that. So next time, obviously I can have a better outcome for the customer and for me. So I think it really just comes down to committing to mastering something, because at the end of the day, like, I would rather listen to one podcast 100 times if I know that's going to help me move the needle and develop into my identity than listen to 100 podcasts and just be entertained and be like, oh, that was cool. That guy's buying apartment buildings. Great. So I found, like, for me on an applicable level, the reason I got pretty good at sales is because I studied it like a maniac in the beginning. Like I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours studying the material, listening to my sales calls, participating in sales trainings and things like that. So I started to have it become this thing called unconscious competence, where like I can pretty much use a sales system without having to have it take up a lot of my mental energy, because I studied it so much and I was able to implement it and like see the feedback loop fire to figure out what was working well, what wasn't working well. So now, like when I go on a sales call as the seller, like I've probably seen that scenario dozens of times, so I can size it up a lot faster just because I've put the reps in. It's like going to the gym. If you've never worked out before and you're going to bench, you're going to be really sore and it's going to be really awkward. But like when you've done that for 3 years, like you can just pick up that bar and almost like clockwork, just pump out 15 reps. And it's not as hard because you've done it before and you've conditioned yourself to be used to that situation.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Absolutely love that. To kind of put a cap on sales, I want to talk a little bit about virtual lifestyle, and I want to hear a little bit about how you're able to utilize agents successfully, because that that they in general, I guess I could say to a certain extent, get a bad rap, and understandably, justified in some cases. But I kind of want to hear how you're able to do business in San Diego, New York. You can be wherever, you can be at a buddy's house, dog sitting, doing podcast interviews in the middle of the day, which I appreciate you taking the time in the middle of the day. I know how hectic the blizzard of daily activity 9 to 5 can be, but I kind of want to hear just in general how you utilize agents and kind of how you're running stuff in San Diego and New York before we talk more so marketing and kind of team structure stuff.
Sure. So on the exit strategy side, number one, if I'm going to flip the property, I got to have an agent who's going to know that value. I mean, I'm going to do my homework, but I need to work with an agent who's going to be, and I work with agents who really know the market and they do business with investors, and they're not going to BS me on what the value is going to be, because I'll have my opinion, they'll have their opinion. And if we're pretty much lined up, it's generally going to be a good outcome. That's on the rehab side, on the wholetail side, when you're just listing properties. On the wholesale side, this year, our company has made a lot of money by using realtors to bring buyers into deals that I would not have had if I didn't know them. And I've paid them, a 2% commission on a sales price, but it made me 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 grand more net. So I have a lot of agents on my distribution list, and those agents have clients that they work with that I don't know. And I can't know everyone, So we just had a deal last week go down. We made like $30,000 on this whole 31 grand on this wholesale deal. And it was from a real estate agent who brought this buyer in who just wanted the property. And it was a total disaster, this house. So I've used agents to help disposition my properties on the back end. And I put in my emails, hey, if you're a real estate agent and you don't want to buy this, but you have a client who wants to buy this, send this over to them and I'll pay you a commission. So they know that I'm not going to jerk them around if they bring a buyer. So they're not scared to like show it to someone. And I'm going to deliver. I had this one real estate agent screw me over she literally manipulated the deal, and I lost like 15, I would have made like 50 on it. I ended up making 30 on it because this agent was a selfish jerk. I could have reported her to the board of realtors, but I didn't. But she basically screwed this whole thing up, and she was being selfish over like 2 grand. And, we got the deal done, and I still paid her anyway. And I told her, I said, listen, if you ever pull this tomfoolery on me again, I'm going to freaking hose you. I'm serious. I'm going to hose you. This is ridiculous, and you're manipulative, and you're what. And I said, I'm going to give you this damn money right now just because I told you I was going to pay you. But if you ever pull this crap again, that's going to be the last deal we're ever going to do together. And she was like, and I'm like, I'm going to pay you because I told you I was going to pay you. So the point of that is doing what you say you're going to do. I told that agent I was going to pay her a fee for the buyer. And I didn't have to because she screwed the whole thing up, and there was another buyer who ended up buying the property. But because of the relationship that I wanted to keep, because she was still bringing me buyers, I gave her money when I otherwise didn't need to give her money, and she was happy as a clam, and we've done deals since. So that's the thing on the disposition. On the acquisition side, oh man, when it comes to buying virtually, like the lifestyle thing, when you have a lot of experience, it's a lot easier. If you're brand new, the learning curve is harder. So I would advise walking properties in your local market just to get an assessment for what the values are, what the repairs are. But when a seller tells me it needs a rehab and I know the area, I'm pretty much going to know what that rehab is going to be because I've done a lot of them. So I can pretty much size up what the repairs are going to be based on the property, what the value is, and I can negotiate over the phone because I pretty much know that there's not going to be a big variance on what the difference might be if I didn't see it. And if it's a scenario where I want to walk the property, we have a condo we might be buying in Rockland County, New York, and I'm having someone walk that just because there's some variables that I want to make sure that are legit before I present a real offer to the guy. So I will have people walk properties on my behalf, mainly just to get an assessment of the repairs if I think that there's some sort of variable that I might be missing on the phone. And it also just allows them to take photos so I can then use those photos, for the wholesale or for just having in my database on the rehab for the scope of work. So you don't need an agent to do that. You can have boots on the ground. I have a buddy of mine who I pay him money to go there. And I also pay him a little kick on the back end on the profit. So just having other people be able to do that when you have experience is a lot easier. In the beginning, I would advise walking properties. But the biggest thing I've noticed is me going to a property, if it is a closable deal on the phone, does not add any value to the process, and it log jams the process. Because then I got to go there, I got to drive there, I got to drive back, it just drains my energy. And I'm like, I could have someone just go look at this for me, and I'm already going to do the deal on the phone anyway. So I don't add any value by being there, right? So I used to be like, oh my God, I'm going to go to all these houses. I freaking hate going to houses. I hate it because it takes time, it takes energy. Someone else can do that. So the only exception to that rule is if I have a hot seller and they want to meet at the property for some reason and it's a deal, I'll go, right? But for the most part, I can do most of it on the phone. A lot of our deals, they're not even living there. So like, it's not like that big of a deal on the phone. But that is how I utilize real estate agents to mostly help me on the sales side of the properties or on the rental side too, having them rent the property for me.
Very cool. So Dispo, you're utilizing kind of like an infinite database of cash buyers where the 2%, whatever percent commission you pay to the agent, the delta between that is pretty much paid for itself by whatever your the, I guess, delta there you're getting from the end buyer. Agreement number one, and I think the book's called The Four Agreements of just sticking to your word, is a huge thing that you mentioned with that, that agent. I mean, in my day, I definitely worked with some pain in the ass agents, but
you're horrendous to work with generally. They are horrendous.
Sticking to your word, like doing that thing, it's interesting. I'm far from perfect. Literally, I wrote down something today of like a follow-up task I need to do with somebody just because I said I was going to do it. But it's interesting how like that identity of just sticking to another Ed Milet type thing, of just sticking to that, how powerful that is down the line, just as far as like how your brain operates when you have the identity of like, I do what I say I'm going to do. That is like a massive thing. An agreement number one. I think I have that book over here somewhere.
That's a great book. That's a great book. Yeah.
But that's cool on the dispo side. On the acquisition side, just like kind of realizing again, like it's interesting hosting podcasts and trying to extract info that when you have like the genuine interest of trying to help all the listeners, because I can't just say do exactly what Greg is doing because you have a certain shop and operation and staff and everything. But on the acquisition side, Greg, the most important thing to me is understanding like going to properties drains my freaking energy. And also like, it just, I'm a huge bottleneck there. So like, unless you're a beginner, like I agree. Like if you're more so starting off, like in general, it's good to start in your own backyard and go, go belly to belly and talk to sellers and walk properties and drive around the neighborhood and see what it looks like. But once you're past that point, I definitely more so agree with Greg's philosophy of like outsourcing that to a boots on the ground, utilizing an agent there. I'm curious, I don't think that you mentioned it here, but internally for your business, I'm not sure if you're licensed yourself, but any type of retail leads where it may not fit one of the 6 criteria, where they're above that assessment asking price, what are you doing to refer those out to agents?
Yeah, great question. So I have some agents I work with where I send them my retail leads and they give me a marketing fee. So when the deal closes, they pay me just a fee for the lead. So it's not a commission or anything like that. It's just like a set fixed marketing fee. And cool. We make money that way. So that's cool. I got this lady sent me like $1,500 a couple of weeks ago. Cause she's very successful. So she's very busy. So I follow up with her. I'm like, hey, like, did those deals close yet? Cause I hold people accountable to shit. Like, cause I hold myself accountable. So I only do to other people what I would do to myself. So like I hold people accountable to do what they say they're going to do. So yeah, she sends us marketing fee checks all the time and that's great. It helps pay for the marketing. But like you said earlier, I mean, with that other real estate agent, I mean, you got to understand, like most real estate agents are clueless, and that's, I hope I don't offend anyone, but like, I don't really care because like they are, and they know that. But the ones who are not clueless are very, 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 very helpful. And the reason the ones who are clueless is because they don't take the time to commit to mastery, and they just cock around, quite frankly. But the ones who are really, really good can be such a big asset to your business, even if they're a pain in the ass to deal with. Because I have a lot of them that are good that are a pain in the ass to deal with. And as long as you treat them with respect and you set the right expectations and you do what you say you're going to do, even if they're a pain in the butt, they're still going to help you make money. They're still going to make money, and it's worth keeping the relationship. Like you don't have to like everyone, but like you have to be able to tolerate people. And the biggest thing I've noticed with working with agents who can be a pain in the ass is like, as long as they can bring business and they can be productive and you have the right expectations set, like just know how they might bother you. Like there's one agent, I doubt he's listening. All he wants to do is call me. And I'm like, bro, just send me a damn text message. Like we're all busy here. Like you don't need to call me to say something. You can text me. And if it's urgent, we'll get on the phone. So like that irritates me, but like, it's still worth interacting with him because he's a good guy and we've both helped each other and it's all good. But you just got to know that the real agents are going to be like repeat agents you're going to work with. Like, it's not like you're going to use a new real estate agent every time you have a wholesale deal. Like you're probably going to use 2 or 3 of them that are going to have, a plethora of buyers.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Marketing wise, I mentioned you were on the Carrot Cast with Trevor a few years back, which was a great episode.
Thank
So
you.
I know that you have I know that you have an online presence. You mentioned direct mail as well. What's
Yeah.
kind of like kind of like a broad stroke here? What's kind of like the most effective things that have been with you marketing strategy and thoughts behind those wise,
Yeah.
like KPIs and things like that?
It's been direct mail, and I'll tell you why. It's because direct mail, you get a lot of bad calls and it's frustrating, but at the end of the day, the economics of direct mail always work out and they're always consistent. So what I mean by that is, like, if you're going to send enough units and spend enough money, you're going to get calls, period. You might not get a lot of calls, but you're going to get calls. And those calls, by the law of averages, will turn into deals over time. I've found that to be the absolute most consistent marketing channel over a 6 to 12 month period, because at the end of the day, people are going to get the mail, they're going to call, and some of those calls are going to be deals. And if you look at the ROI of a direct mail campaign over 6 to 12 months, assuming, you don't live in a cave, you're going to make money. And it's just math, right? The reason I like mail is because of that. I do cold calling and texting and all that stuff. And that's been very, very profitable in San Diego. I stopped because it became less profitable. But there's a lot more variables with that marketing channel from like the TCPA could shut it down. You could get sued easily. You could whatever. So I found with direct mail, just the consistency of the channel over 6 to 12 months always yields profitable campaigns, right? So it's like, I'll give you an example. We have a deal. Most of the direct mail calls are garbage, and my assistant would admit that too. But we have a deal that will close in a couple of weeks. We'll make 30 something grand on it, 35 grand. And we spent like 6. So I'm like, spent 6, probably going to make 35. I'll do that all day long. And then the thing I love about direct mail too is that once you spend the money and the leads start coming in and you get your money back by closing a deal, everything else is straight gravy, right? That's like why I love that channel. Like we have campaigns where I'm like, oh, we're probably going to have to mail these people like 6, 7 times to get the campaign profitable, which is usually the case. But sometimes we'll hit a home run on like drop 1 or drop 2. We'll make our 50 grand. And then I'm like, all right, now this campaign is going to continue. And every single dollar we bring in from this campaign is going to be straight net profit, because we already got our investment back plus the original profit. So it's like the gift that keeps on giving. And then another thing on the online side, I mean, I don't do PPC or Facebook, but we get online leads. Like there was an appointment that happened today, I believe, that I have to follow up on and negotiate after this call. But we get online leads from SEO. So people are Googling our company and they're coming to our website, clicking through and opting in. And we don't get as many leads there, but when we do get leads from online, they're very motivated and there's a lot of intention behind what they're doing because they seek us out. We didn't seek them out. Like we have a deal right now we'll make 38 on, and that was a guy, Google search, sell my house fast, Millwood, New York, which is in a very expensive area. Got a property, vacant, needs work, reason for selling, timeline, the whole thing. I didn't have to, the thing is, he came to the table with that, right? I just verified that when I was on the phone with him, but that was an online lead. So essentially that was free, right? Because I don't even pay for SEO. I just have SEO from being in business for a while and used to pay for it. So like the cost per acquisition there was literally 0, right? And that was a fat deal. That could have been a mail deal. Like that guy probably gets mail from me, right? But at the same time, like I think being able to have multiple lines in the water has been very profitable for our company. And then the last thing I'll say about the marketing is like, there's a lot of like emphasis over like mass calling, mass texting, and that's great. But we have done just absolutely monster deals, from identifying like vacant properties on the lists that we would mail. And instead of mass blasting them, digging deep on that property to really find out why it's vacant. And like, if it's truly vacant, by sometimes driving it, and then pursuing those owners on the properties that we already know are probably going to be deals. And a lot of the times the conversation is, oh, I didn't even know I owned that property. Oh, I can get some money for it. Really? And that turns into like a 6-figure deal. Like, and we have had that happen, where like a guy was like, oh yeah, I didn't think I owned it. And like, well, would you want to get 10 grand for it? Yeah, sure. We end up making 50. So like that, I call it like niche vacant house marketing, man, has been just ridiculous for us. And that's a very low cost per acquisition because a lot of it is just time, not money.
Mm-hmm. And that's something applicable, like anybody can do in any market.
Anybody can do
that. Vacant house in every market. Yeah.
Go on PropStream and pull a list of vacant houses and just do some homework on those vacant houses. And I mean, you're going to have to get a lot of them, but I mean, there's humongous deals, especially in an area where there's like, I'm sure like in Baltimore, there's a lot of vacant houses, especially in some of those tougher areas. I mean, I guarantee you there's people in Baltimore right now who own property and they don't think they can sell it. And if you give them $5,000 for it, you can probably wholesale it for 20 and make 15 grand, and like it's going to take you some time, but I mean, they're super profitable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to ask kind of like a Napoleon Hill Think and Grow Rich question, since he took all the time just interviewing like 200 people and trying to figure out the principles, which ended up being all the chapters for the Think and Grow Rich book. Out of like the 180 and change episodes you've done on the podcast, what do you think are like the biggest commonalities between people that just have like optimized life and business and at the end of the day just like enjoy themselves?
I think they're intentional about what they're doing. I think they're specific on what they want, and they're just intentional every day on what they're doing. Obviously, they're not perfect, but if they're a successful person in all areas of their life, hopefully not just business, they're intentional about it. Like they get up every day. They might not hit a home run every day, but they're at least trying to row the boat in a certain direction that they want to go after. Right. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've found from people who are very successful that I've interviewed is they're intentional on what they're doing and why they're doing it. And that intentionality leads to the right actions that they obviously need to do on a daily basis and that their team needs to do in order to, make progress.
Love it. On a personal note, because I'm in the same headspace, a little bit of a 5 whys analysis here. We don't want to go all 5 whys, but why do you think it is that you're so in love with the game of golf and almost like addicted to getting better at it?
Man, I love that. I think that I call it a 4-hour vacation because it allows me. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and how does it relate to business and life?
Dude, golf, I've realized is like, it's like business, right? Like you'll hit a great shot and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get par. And then you throw one into the woods and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get par. And then in business, oh my gosh, the seller wants to sell to me. And then the next day, oh, I sold to your competitor. And you're like, oh my God, I had this thing right. So I think there's a lot of analogies like, with golf and business. It's like at the end of the day, you got to be consistent to be good at golf. You got to be consistent in business by doing the right things every day to have the results you want to get. So I've found that kind of like principle intertwined between golf and business. And then I think it allows me to like just chill out sometimes and like just get out of the, put my phone away here. There's pandemonium most of the day and just like put it in the golf cart, not look at it for a couple hours and just focus on having fun, being outside, whether it's California or New York, and just allowing me to like kind of let all the work compile on this little device. So then when I get back from playing golf, I'm excited to get into the work. I'm excited to like, look and see what I got to do. Like sometimes I'll get off the golf course and I'll sit in my car and I'll just be on my phone for like 30 minutes, like catching up. And I'm like, all pumped up. Yeah. We got leads. Oh, we got this, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? So like, for example, like after this podcast, I'll probably just like go off the grid, put my phone away, put my laptop away, take the dog for a walk and just hang out and just reflect. And then when I'm done with that time, I'm going to want to be like, all right, what's going on? Like, what do we got? What emails we got going? Who called? Who do I need to call back? Like, and I'm more excited to work because I've allowed myself to recharge after, spending time doing something that is intentional.
Love that, man. Yeah, like I said, I'm asking just because I noticed it on social media, but I'm in the same boat myself, just becoming like a COVID golfer like 10 months ago.
A COVID golfer, I like that. That's funny.
I grew up playing like soccer, basketball, played soccer in like high school and college and stuff. I know that you were pretty deep into the hockey game and had some aspirations to play there professionally, but yeah, golf is interesting, and I almost go more so the avenue. I love that I hired a coach recently and trained with him, which kind of like it expedites like a lot of the learning process. But I think part of the thing that I almost have the bug about or I'm addicted to is just like seeing yourself progress so much, man. And that's like so applicable to everything. Like it's addicting to me in a way because you just like see yourself like getting better in addition to all the qualitative stuff that you're mentioning too about like unplugging and enjoying your time and stuff like that. And that helps you, recovery and relaxation is huge for your quality of work when you're actually in the work doing it. But I wanted to ask that, and that'd be cool if we could hit the link someday, maybe in Miami or New York at some time. That'd be cool.
Dude, 100%, bro. I'm always down to play golf. Like it's the easiest offer. I already have the clubs in my car. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. We're going, see you later, phone.
Love that, man. Well, this has been a super enjoyable interview and glad that we've got on the books after getting it rescheduled a few times. And I know for the audience listening to this, you've heard from someone that's super, super successful, not just in like how their business health and how their business is doing, but someone that's finding some high 80-20 leverage points at a young age that's going to allow, however he wants to live his life moving forward, he's going to get closer and closer to getting that way. To end the interview, I want to know, being relatively super, not super young, but young, being young, and there are people listening to this that are older and, maybe not as far along in personal development or business. What do you think in general is just like the best advice at this stage that you give to people listening to the show to improve quality of life, business, and just at the end of the day, more life, get more out of life?
Yeah. So here's one I'm going to steal from Ed Milet because it's applicable to me and I've done it and it's worked, is like, at the end of the day, if you want to become more successful, you got to raise your identity and your thermostat. And this is from Ed Milet. So like giving him all the credit in the world. I'm sure he learned it from someone else as well. So
I love this example.
Yeah. Like the reason you might not be where you're at, like let's say you're older and you don't have as much money as you want, is because you don't believe you're worth that type of money. And that belief is the governor that's allowing you to not make that money. So like, let's say you increase your identity and you start to increase your confidence and your self-worth. And Ed Milet like goes into detail on this. So I'll let him help you with that. But if you can increase that identity, you're going to inevitably do the actions that are going to get you the results. So the reason in the beginning, like I didn't have experience and stuff like that, but my identity was not the greatest either. Like I didn't have the belief in myself. I didn't really like keep promises I made to myself that much. So I would like kind of have this dissonance between like the money I wanted to make and the stuff I was doing. But once I started increasing my identity and, becoming better by doing the work and believing in myself, the money started to follow because every day I was doing the work that had to be done in order to hit the results and the marketing stuff and all that. So I would say really get clear on increasing your identity and, learn from people who are way more successful than you. So like I learned from guys who are worth 9 figures. So I'm like, if I can take a thing or two from these guys who are worth 9 figures, maybe they're not perfect in their personal life or whatever, but I'm sure I can increase my business. Right. And the other thing too is like, learn from people you want to learn from and don't take everything they say as gospel. Like there are people that are very successful in business that have horrendous personal relationships and they're just like horrendous to be around. So like I used to think everyone who was rich was a good person and like I need to be exactly like them. And then I started to realize like I can just take things from someone who is successful in business and I can discount everything they say about relationships because maybe they've been divorced 3 times, right? Not saying like I'm not shunning them, but like, and then there's other people who might not be rich, but they have a great philosophy on family. And I can take their financial advice and throw it in the recycle bin, but I can take their family advice and I can use it to, have a better family life. So just being able to like pick things from people who are experts in certain areas has been really helpful for me as well. And I think if people want to be successful, I think the first thing they should do is also focus on getting their money right too. Because I think when you get to a point where you have consistent income coming in from a business or whatever, you can make better decisions, you can think clearer, and then you can kind of figure out really what you want out of life. And I think until you get to a point where like you have the business kind of making money every month, it's hard to do that because you still have to worry about getting things paid, which has been there, done that. It happens to everyone. But once you get to a point where you have money coming in and your business is profitable, you can then start to focus on other areas of your life. But I think it's important to take care of money right initially so you can free up that mental space to focus on other things.
Love that. Ed Milet is amazing.
Awesome
highly recommend Psycho Cybernetics. I think I was mentioning.
Yeah, talk all about that.
Stratton Brown. Yeah, talks all about that. I'm even personally rereading like a bunch of the few chapters, trying to do that at least 3 times a week to like really ingrain that. Then I'm going to go back to Think and Grow Rich. Kind of what Greg was talking about. Like I like to read some of the same books, like either quarterly or every year, just to really inundate myself with that. And I love Ed Milet, kind of with the thermostat example. Talks about like, why does Tom Brady win so many Super Bowls or like have such a successful career? Like what I think he specifically says, why does Tom Brady have so many game-winning drives where he's able to lead his team back? And he's like, he deep down has a conviction and belief that he's the best quarterback and he can lead his team and he can win every single game. And that's kind of that is the thermostat example Ed Milet gives, or one of them, where it's like, he's just going to kind of naturally levitate towards doing that. So Psycho Cybernetics, great book for there. That's kind of like the Godfather book for all the like self-image psychology type books.
It's a great book.
So that's amazing. And I love that you said the skill of kind of like being able to pick the best aspects or just like learn certain things or kind of adapt, take certain things from people. I've said that for a long time, that I really think any interaction that you have in life, you can seriously like learn something from that person. Like obviously you don't have to copy their exact life or thoughts or philosophies, but like every single interaction you have with somebody is an opportunity to learn and just add it to your bag of just life and skills. So I love that.
100%, dude. This was a fun interview. I really enjoyed you having me on. This is a blast. This is a really one of the more fun ones I've done. Some people, it's just like they're just. This is
Yeah.
like a really good open-ended conversation. I feel like we had dinner and just recorded or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
My pleasure, man. That's a pleasure and a genuine privilege. That's what I shoot for. Before I let you off the hook here, I didn't ask what's your go-to sales resource for training yourself and your team? Is that John Martinez, something potentially you offer? I know that
Yeah.
you've had the productivity course in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
past.
So sales wise, I'd say if you're in real estate, John Martinez, I think it's called the REI Sales Academy, I
Mhm.
believe, is a very good tool
Mhm.
to learn from. And also Never Split the Difference is a great book. If you just read that book like 17 times and implemented it, you would make a lot of money. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And then another book I'll give out there is 80/20 Sales and Marketing. It's
Mhm.
more of a marketing, well, it's actually a sales and a marketing book. So that's a really good resource. So if you like got John's Sales Academy, read 80/20 Sales and Marketing 20 times, and read Never Split the Difference 20 times and started talking to sellers, your Chase banker is not going to recognize you in a year.
Yeah. I love that. And then, dude, what's the best place to follow you and stay in touch with you?
Yeah. Two things. You can follow me on Instagram at Grego, GREGO _37, or you can shoot me an email at Greg at Velocity, VELOCITY house, HOUSE, buyers, BUYERS.com.
Awesome. Well, guys, I will have all things Greg in the description. I know that he also has some, I guess I would say a course on productivity. And also, if you guys are doing deals, I guess I should let you say it, but there's an opportunity to work with Greg on a deal basis and then also do some consulting. I believe book a call with Greg.com, but I'll let you expand on that quickly. And then I actually will throw that in the show notes as well for you guys
Cool.
so you can pull it up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking to do more real estate deals with people in the Hudson Valley or in San Diego. So if you want to like JV with me or you want to sell me a deal or whatever, like I'm a buyer too. So hit me up on probably Instagram for that or email me. Yeah, so that's a great way. I've been doing a lot of JV deals this year, been making a lot of money with my friends, and it's been a blast. So if you're local to the Hudson Valley or if you're in San Diego and you have a property, you want me to just at least take a look at and tell you what my thoughts are, I'd be happy to take a look at the deal and give you some advice.
Love it. Well, Greg, thanks again one last time. And guys, a lot of fun conversation here, but also, as the usual intention, some stuff that is applicable for you guys to help your life and business. So thanks so much. This is a fun one and talk to you guys soon.